now going to invite our very exciting young panelists one by one. So we are going to start with Shehryar Zishan. Shehryar is a passionate young climate advocate whose work focuses on environmental sustainability and practical climate solutions. He has produced impactful videos on renewable energy, water conservation, and sustainable practices, spotlighting innovations such as rainwater harvesting, bamboo afforestation, and mycelium-based eco-alternatives. So he's done a lot more, which I think we will discuss once we start the conversation. Shahryar, please join us. Next up is Faris Ahmed. Faris is a student leader and a young climate policy advocate. He is the co-author of Pakistan's first climate refugee bill, presented in the National Assembly, championing protection for communities displaced by climate change. His research on forced migration, conducted with Brown University's Professor Wazira Zamindar, contributes to an upcoming Cambridge University Press volume. Paris? Next, we have Shazre Tarar. Shazre is the author of Re-Evolution of Society. Shazre is a published author and an environmental systems and society student with the IB. Her research and writing explore how communities, cities, and young people respond to environmental and social changes. She also curates a visual history project on Lahore's evolving urban landscape. Shazre, could you please join us on stage? We also have Muhammad Hassan with us, who's got exceptional academic record. He has a strong early commitment to environmental awareness and sustainability, a passion that earned him the title of the national winner in the 2021 nationwide competition hosted by Green Living Association. Well done, Hassan, and could you please join us on stage? We are also joined by Mohammad Shamir. Shamir is an A-level student from Crescent Model School, and he's an active, articulate climate advocate. He has constantly demonstrated a strong commitment to environmental causes through his participation in school-based sustainability initiatives and community awareness activities. So, Shamir, could you please join us on stage as well? Well, thank you. I've got an amazing set of young people sitting with us who will be doing most of the talking. But I'll give you a little bit of a background of why we think this talk is very, very important. So most of you have either read, are doing Cambridge qualifications or have read a Cambridge book or are in schools that offer those qualifications. Cambridge is part of the University of Cambridge. We are not-for-profit, and we are the world's largest qualification provider for 14 to 9, actually 4 to 19. So Cambridge has also been at the forefront of issues that impact societies and young people in all of our lives. And we have a huge climate initiative because we feel that education can impact climate change. We feel that education is a solution to most of our problems, and climate change is no exception. So what we are trying to do is to improve what people know about climate, educate students, and also encourage them to act. And we've got brilliant examples here with us of young people who want to do something about it. So as you all know, Pakistan is one of the 5 most impacted countries by climate. We haven't made the crisis. We've got very little contribution to it, but we're one of the worst impacted, as are a lot of other countries in the global south. So we are no exception, but I think we are one of the worst impacted countries here as well. So we live and breathe it. those living in Lahore know how smog badly impacts them. North of the country, we have floods that impact our day to day lives. You have hailstorms. And you want to think about what kind of world are we leaving for our children? And you want to think about how can we support. And what we've seen in Cambridge is a lot of climate anxiety amongst young people, because thanks to social media and AI generated images, sometimes it feels like the world is coming to an end. And this is all based on research that in developed countries also a lot of young people have come to seek mental help in anxiety related to climate change. So you are anxious if you don't understand what the problem is and what the solutions can be. We feel that if you understand something or tackle it heads on, then you feel more empowered. So we also want young people to feel empowered to do something about it. And we want young people to have this idea of active hope. By active hope, we mean that the actions that all of you are taking actually have an impact. We are not bystanders. Like, Mrs. Kasuri was saying in the morning in our inaugural address, that we are co creating future together. We are not simply sitting here thinking this is how the world will change. We are all a part of that change. And nobody can demonstrate that better than all of you. So I'm going to start by the first question, and I'm going to come to all of you one by one. And as we were chatting before, so we would like everybody to have an equal airtime, and also, make sure that the audience is able to understand you. So if I were to ask you to think about one aspect of climate change which you think has really impacted you, and one aspect you think has really impacted the world around you. So, what would be those two big things that make you think or encouraged you to take action? So, Sharyar, shall we start with you?
Okay. So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I am honored to be speaking at this panel at such a huge platform, I must say. And I must thank everybody who is, here to listen to our conversation. I am highly grateful. Okay. So, to answer your question, Ma'am Uzma, so your question basically states that one aspect which has impacted me, my fellows, the school community, and one aspect which has impacted the entire world, right? So, first, I think we need to shed some light on the fact that people don't really consider climate change as a viable issue. People don't, pay so much attention to it. And there was a dialogue, I believe, from the Roman Empire that if you give people bread and circuses, they will not revolt. And that goes to show that if you provide people with food, if you provide people with entertainment, they will not ponder, they will not wander around to areas such as which are linked to climate change, right? So I believe that we have a social, disconnect. We live in a dilemma where,
But
you
what
know,
are those problems? Do you
okay.
want to pinpoint one
Yes,
or two?
yes, yes, yes. I'll be going over that. So, firstly, at the global scale, we have the population crisis. The world population is right now around 8.25 billion, if I'm not wrong, right? So, immense resource exploitation has been started, right? That's the major point of view which we can relate to climate change, and that has impacted all of us. So whether it be the smog in Lahore, whether it be the electric shutdowns that our schools are constantly facing, whether it be the floods that were in this that were uh, basically rampaging over the whole country in 2022. So that was a huge issue, I believe. So
Thank you.
that's the major factor that impacted us all, and I believe that effectively answers your question.
Thank you, Sharyar. Thank you, Faris.
Hi, everyone. So, on a personal level, I believe that one aspect of climate change which I took in on a personal level was as Shayar mentioned before, the floods which rampaged throughout our country in 2022, I based a lot of my work around that because the devastation caused was unparalleled, and this was something new which we had almost never faced before. And other than that, there's also like the major heat waves which we just faced as well earlier this year. It caused the shutdown and delay of many schools in Lahore and Islamabad as well. However, also and as we look on a global level as well, we're noticing that there's a lot more air pollution going on right now in places like Australia. There's fire tornadoes as well, which are insane to believe. And in LA and the US as well, there are fires and heat waves going around. So it's not just one issue, it's a series of climate disasters going on across the world, believe or which I believe are a major source of inspiration for me to take on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Faris. Shasri.
Thank you. So, obviously, for the personal level, I would like to start off with something that for a Lohari could be considered basic. It's the smog that dictates when we throw our weddings, the smog that dictates when we go to school. And the same reason majority of us are coughing here. The production of greenhouse gases has gotten to such an extent that there is a visible white sheen in the air when you go outside, which I feel we've all just laughed off and said, what can you say? Most polluted city in the world. But for the global factor, I would like to talk about the rising temperatures that are leading to habitat fragmentation and degradation. I feel when we think about climate change, we are so focused on ourselves and what it means for agriculture and the futures, not remembering that for months the Amazon was on fire. The coral reefs are projected to be bleached in the next decade or so. We are losing some of the most important habitats of our world, and it's being ignored because, like all humans do, our biggest folly is selfishness, and we still only think about what climate change means for the future of the human race. That would be
Thank
all.
you, Shasri. Shamir.
Yes. For me, the aspect that really affected me and my family would have to be definitely be smog. So, smog is something that we all experience. We can see it, we can smell it, and it really affects how we do our things, how we plan our routines. I really look forward this from the start of the year because this time frame of the year, the autumn, this is the perfect time for students to play outside and be with their friends. But this time, the smog, this really could not make us play outside. I saw my little brother, he was inside. I just asked him just go outside and play, and he said that I have to consider smog. Just a little kid curious about smog. That's how serious the condition is. A few days back, I had a really sore throat, and that was because of the smog. I even shooted my shot out video with a heavy voice, and you have to wear masks to be protected from it. So why do we create masks as a norm now? They did not used to be a norm before the COVID. After the COVID, it's pretty normal for us to wear masks and roam around just to breathe. So in a few years from now, will we carry the oxygen tanks with all these masks? We really need to see where we are heading. And for the smog, I think the government is doing really great measures, but still, it's up to the whole of humanity to solve these issues. Climate issues are an issues of all of us, not just some ethnic group or just some government. It's for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Shamir. Asil.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Mohammed Hassan, and I'm really honored for this opportunity. And I will add a little bit to whatever has been mentioned by my fellow panelists. That today climate change does not exist as a generic ideology that we see in our curriculum, basically only, but it also is a sensual fact that you, me, and everyone sitting within this community is able to sense and feel and even see, as mentioned by many of them. And I feel like when, for instance, if we take an example from our daily lives, we are able to see that whenever we walk out of our shelter, we are able to experience an extreme wave of heat or extreme wave of cold or even smoke and such climatic changes. And I think it influences our life in so many different ways. It influences our health in so many different ways that we are somehow suffering through circumstances that we never thought would even exist in today's life, right? And even on a personal level, if I'm able to quote an example, if we take the example of summer 2025, it was an extreme heat wave that even most of us was not able to exist without the air conditioning. It was almost miserable to exist without the air conditioning outside. The extreme sunlight, the UV rays, the extreme tanning, and obviously dehydration, such issues have progressively only gotten worse for each and every one of us. So I think it's a product of self-realization and everything that comes along with it. And on an international level, as mentioned by them, there's so many prevailing issues like glacier melting, flooding, even on a national level, and increasing population, not equal food demands, and so many equivalent issues that we are not facing with that same initiative that we should have at this stage. So I think it's an awakening for humanity itself that we need to realize that this is not an international issue that we can oversee, or it's not a national issue which is only for our government to solve. It's an individual and personal issue that we will all solve individually. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, all of you are here because you've either been great advocates to work for a better environment and a better earth, or you've done some amazing work. So now I'm going to ask you one by one to, share what you've done, what those initiatives have been, so that our audience can hear about your achievements and we can understand the possible solutions that young people have in their minds. So, Shahryar, can we start with you?
Okay. So thank you so much for that question. So I'll be starting off with a very divergent fact, that is that human brain is a very very dangerous tool, right? So it's a figment of a very larger stipulation that we all share. Okay. So what I mean by that is, if you want, human brains can do wonders, but if you progress and extrapolate to the fact, human brains are also prone to cause destruction. They're also prone to invent things that can like very evidently lead to their extinction, right? So speaking about my achievements, we recently made a video with the British Council. The topic of the competition was Your World Video, and we made a video on climate change basically. So the fact that we highlighted that most people, communities, including teachers, professors, and book authors, even get wrong, is that plastic is a bad thing. No, it's not. Plastic is a good thing if you know how to use it. Plastic is a good thing if you know how to implement it properly. So, relating that to my initiative, plastics can replace timber, which is wood. Plastics, if you make plastics as a high density polyethylene, methyl methacrylate, or these kind of plastics like UPVC, CPVC, or PVC, or PHET. So these are type of plastics that don't contribute to micro plastics, and they are the type of plastics which do not cause pollution in the ocean. When we are talking about pollution in the ocean, and when we are talking about water contamination, when we are talking about arsenics, that's not related to plastics. That's the problem at our disposal. Like, how do we dispose plastics in general, right? So like today, plastics can be manufactured into making 3D houses. And what that essentially does is that plastic is a polymer. It locks carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is a greenhouse gas, and it stores it basically. So now that carbon dioxide cannot escape back into the environment. So that's what we told British Council. That's what we said, that you need to increase the production of plastic, even though that's very counterintuitive. And many people, they still don't understand that plastic is favorable for us if that's not contributing to microplastics, right? Then burning of wood should be stopped immediately. We also pointed that out. And in my school, Beacon House Defense Campus, we are leading an initiative that is relating to mycelium. Mycelium is a very, very useful product. It's derived from mushrooms, and it can reduce paper waste. And like at Beacon House, we are also like going all green, introducing solar panels and reducing paper waste, whether it be through feature lawns or like anywhere else. So that's due to the dynamic leadership in our school, especially Miss Naila right there. So I'm very, honored to be part of such a prestigious institution that focuses towards these
Thank
point
you.
of views, right?
We'll now, yeah. You,
Just a second, ma'am. Okay. So I also did research work on bamboo towers, artificial glaciers, and other than that, porous concrete. So what porous concrete means is when the rain falls on asphalt, it is stagnant over there. It can cause holes and it can destroy your entire infrastructure. Countries which are developed, such as Singapore, Japan, US, UK, have started using porous concrete on their roads. What that does is that when rain falls or when precipitation falls, it goes into the aquifers and it recharges the water table. So these are some of my projects. I have many more too, but
Okay.
I won't be,
Yeah.
taking more of the
No, no,
time
no.
as
Thank
we are
you.
restricted. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharyar. So I had a lot of questions about Sharyar's project. So just plugging in, if people want to find out more, you might want to write your questions down and we can have a bigger conversation because you've touched on some very interesting and important solutions. G. Faris, would you like to tell us about your contribution?
All right, thank you. So basically, to first off, to understand the baseline for my work, you should understand that there's a distinction I've made between what a climate refugee is and what an other typical refugee is. Typically, when we think about refugees like that, we think they're survivors of some sort of conflict or disaster, people migrating from their homes to somewhere else. It's not often we think or attribute them to climate disasters like floods or heat waves or droughts like that. So, using the Sindh 2022 Sindh floods as a baseline, I observed the destruction, the devastation, the communities which were pretty much leveled and drowned as a result of the flooding, and I observed the kind of aid these people were receiving, which was minimal at best. So, it isn't just the fact that they needed to be resettled or they could go back to the homes which were destroyed. They needed somewhere else, somewhere new in which they could resettle or go to. That's why using this information, I was able to draft or propose a legislation which deals with their rehabilitation and provides aid to these displaced people and provides them with new homes which they can resettle or rebuild their communities which were so terribly devastated.
Thank you, Faris. And Faris's contribution is now going to become a part of a Cambridge publication as well. Um, so, Shazri, do you want to talk about your work on how yeah, the urban landscape is impacted?
Okay, so my work when it comes to climate change has always been based on the environment, but and how the environment and our history is affected by years of terrible urban planning and pollution. So one of my major projects was Kasrate Kachra, where I led a series of litter drives around the city where we committed to cleaning up majority of Lahore's parks. However, the most disheartening part of that would be no matter how many kids we got and how long it took us to clean up the park, you go back the next day and it's the exact same. Similarly, my historical archival project, Irtika, looked at the difference of urban planning and how our city has changed, where you find historical buildings now covered in telephone wires and garbage heaps. Just showing, it just really helps raise awareness to how terribly we as humans have preserved our environment and how we are contributing to climate change.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I think that's something we see every day, but aren't doing or not able to do much about it. Shamir?
Yes. So first of all, my school provided me with a lot of opportunities, but most prominently, what I did was it was a research paper with our Eco Vibe Society's president that was on why our government policies fail, why they are not being implemented, and we made it accessible to all our students. And most prominently, I would say that my school also provided me with the Asian Development Bank's various courses which I did, and after which I was approached. I got an email from EY in which I was asked for an apprenticeship. After this, what really inspired me and which I'm working on with our EcoWeb Society's president is that we are working on what role can students play. Because personally, he and I both think that there is not much clarity about what an individual student can do. And we go up on the internet, we search up all the SDGs, but for a student, there is no clarity. We are making that SDGs and we are breaking it down to what a student can do and making it more, like you could say, we are breaking it down into small steps. And with each step, a student can approach, he can be more towards environmental issues. And at the end, I would say that it's always like we should start projects like our school's EcoVibe Society. And also, we are starting one thing on an Instagram is that we are starting a page for all those students who are interested on environment, who want to address the issue. So we are deciding small steps, like really tiny for us, like not using plastic bag for a day. So we could actually do that. And at the end of the day, with thousands of students doing that, that would be a big leap, a big jump for the environment. So
Thank you. No, that's a huge contribution, and small steps lead to big action. Thank you so much. And Hassan, would you like to tell us what you've been doing?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to shed light on a climate-based report that I wrote 2 years ago. It was from a global perspective subject, and it mainly revolved around the topic sustainability, because I believe that we live in an era of sustainability, and while there has been so many advancements in this technology, we as a low economical country still focus on the carbon-based mediums and carbon-based fuels, which have not only worsened the climate condition in our country, but has also placed us on a bar which is really harmful for each and every person that lives within this country. And obviously, there is a very broad perspective to the whole report. It included local, national, as well as international perspectives that reflected on how the climate carbon-based emissions in today's world are contributing to climate change, while era of sustainability can modify the whole concept and put us in a better condition. And alongside that, I have also ranked as a national winner in a Climate Defender event in the chapter Green Living, which basically emphasized on understanding the basic fundamentals of climate change as a young person, and how young people believe or how they want to implement a certain initiative to bring about positive change. And moreover, I would also like to release a sneak peek into my future project. It's basically a science literary magazine which will explore STEM as well as environmental concepts to make them more interactive for the people as well as teenagers who scroll a lot of their time on social media. And I think in an era of procrastination, we need to make things more interactive so we get more engagement and more understanding in the face of procrastination, obviously. So I guess that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now we've talked about, things that you've done, things that you've, felt. So we've seen, like I was talking to you about in my introduction, there's a lot of climate anxiety. Young people are worried about the future of the world. We are, but you guys are more, and you interact with a lot of peers. So how do you guys feel about it? And anybody can, ask to have a first go, whoever's ready. What triggers those feelings of anxiety? What do you see around? Or is there stress involved in it? Or are we just thinking that there is? Yes, Shazrin.
So, climate anxiety is mainly due to the fact that we're all so overexposed to all of these scenarios, yet none of us fully understand what's happening. You open Instagram and you see everyone going, the climate clock in New York has 4 years left, which, for any of you who don't know, the climate clock counts down the time to the point of no return when climate change cannot be reversed. But the thing about climate anxiety is you need to look at both sides. Yes, we should be scared, but at the same time, NASA has just said that due to the Montreal Protocol, which was the first ever universal ratification ever signed in 1987 to phase out greenhouse gases, due to this, the ozone hole above Antarctica will be solved and fixed by 2060. If we all work together, it can be solved. Climate change and being scared of it isn't bad. Fragility isn't bad. But hopefulness is not realism, it is paralysis. And it's time we all realize that and move towards the solutions rather than whine about what we're losing.
Thank you. So, Shasri, what I understood from what you've said is there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of doomsday scenarios out there, and the worst kind of scenario gets the most eyeballs, I suppose, and that's making people anxious. Um, do you see? Theory नहीं देनी जवाब बताना है. Do you feel people being upset about it? Do you feel any kind of anxiety?
Okay, so what I have observed in the community relating to eco anxiety is firstly, there are many people worried, they're distressed, and there's total chaos, I believe. So, firstly, we'll be starting off with the facts, not the predictions. So, during the last glacial maximum, the sea level was 125 meters below the current sea level. So there was a lot more land for our ancestors to roam around on, right? So what that means is that if the whole ice, if the whole ice melts today, the sea level can go up till
How
65.
does that make you feel? Tell us about, do you feel climate anxiety or do you
Yes.
feel, and what kind of things trigger that anxiety? What makes you upset?
Okay.
Or people around you?
Yes, yes, ma'am, I'm getting to that. So, 65 to 70 meters of sea level rise will be introduced, right? So, that will sink major infrastructural buildings, that will disrupt global air flows, that will disrupt global economies, and that will impact the developing countries such as Pakistan. Now, these are all facts. Now, these are irrefutable facts which you cannot ignore under any circumstances, right?
True.
So, what my message is to my fellows is to be slightly optimistic about the situation, because individuals and companies, even companies and like organizations, are rising up, combating climate change at a very, very larger scale.
Okay, thank you.
So,
We'll now move on to
yes, ma'am, surely.
who wants to talk about, yeah. Okay. Phir Faris will come to you after that.
Okay, so I agree with both of them, as they mentioned that most of the people are really concerned about the peak media exaggeration about the climatic condition and the future of our world, as most of us might have heard that by 2026 the world is ending. Right, but I feel like beyond the exaggeration, there something that personally worries me is that when I talk about climatic change, most of the people present their opinion that there is a wide variety of people who don't care about climate change. So why should we be the one to stay back?
Can you
and
say that again? Sorry?
I said I have come across many people who have presented their opinion that there is a wide majority of people who do not believe in climatic change or that do not care about climatic change. So why should we be the one to stay back or take initiatives to counter the climatic change effects? As they argue that one man or single initiative is not going to create that much impact, even though I feel like being concerned about certain something is really important, but alongside that you have to be really optimistic as well, because optimism in my opinion drives real action, and you're able to figure out what the actual problem is and where the actual issue rises, and hence we're able to innovate new solutions that will help counter the issue at all. And I feel like in today's world there needs to be a modification in the way climatic change is being taught in schools and many platforms, and they should encourage practical knowledge as well, so people know how to deal with certain circumstances if they're faced with such a crucial condition. And beyond media exaggeration, I feel like they do not listen to media exaggeration. That is what I think.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting one. And I think what I've understood from you is we want people to understand. So what we've done, and I think this will, again give you a bit of optimism, is that Cambridge has started a global initiative. It's called Climate Quest. So we have this program which is about 2.5 hours, and it is open to everybody. We've got a Pakistan edition in which you can look at how globally climate change or climate science has evolved. How does it impact us? We've also we've had LUMS look at it as well, so that we have a proper Pakistani context. It's not something out of, pulled from here and there. The case studies are translated into Urdu as well. And the reason we have that, and then we are also going to do them in regional languages, because the anxiety is a collective anxiety. The not understanding does not stop at Cambridge schools and people living in urban centers. We need to tackle these problems collectively. So you guys can do that as a micro credential. But what I'd really like to encourage you, who are the real change makers and influencers, is try and look out for people beyond your immediate circle. Maybe they don't have access to these things, and try and maybe get together a group of students and make them go through all that content, which is fact based, knowledge based. And the university has a huge climate project. It's called Net Zero. So they are a part of this whole initiative that we have taken. And Cambridge itself is going to be, inshallah, carbon neutral by 2048 in everything that we do, the university as well as assessment. So over to you, Faris. You had something to add on the topic.
Yes, I just wanted to talk about the ever-growing source of climate anxiety and eco-anxiety, like especially our generation is facing. I completely agree with my peers that there's a lot of fear-mongering and a lot of big headlines we see on social media about new climate disasters happening every day. But I also believe that a lot of this anxiety stems from frustration we have and the fact that almost no one listens to us or listens to the scientists, to people who are actively championing for climate reforms. So I believe that instills a sort of sense of hopelessness as well. Especially even though we have some change, there's always something which counteracts it. Like most recently, I believe the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he rolled back on certain climate reforms. He denies climate change and is actively pushing for the production of fossil fuels. So yes, I believe that we're just sort of stuck in the middle here where no matter what we try to do, there's always someone who just doesn't listen or puts us down in a way. And that creates a sense of hopelessness and frustration with the status quo. And yeah, I believe that's what contributes to the anxiety we're all facing right now about climate change and the environment as a whole.
No, thank you, Faris. And I think we have failed you as, an older generation, and I can imagine. But like we were talking, these are swings of pendulum, the denial of climate change. We all know it is here. There is a science to it. And but I hear a lot of feelings around the topic. There's a lot of emotion, not being heard. You guys mentioned words like fear. I've been using the word anxiety a lot, but that's my word. But I'm hearing from you all is, too much information, which is probably negative. So what can we, what can people do? What can parents do? What do you think schools can do? What do you think platforms would be useful? Art spaces? So if each one of you could, if you had a wish list, so what would that be? What can we do to make it better for you? How would you feel heard, or how would you feel less anxious about these things?
Miss, I would like to answer that. So, for the Faris said that climate anxiety is due to frustration. For in terms of psychology, we need to talk to someone. For us, it's our Miss Shazia. She herself is an environmental activist. But for the students, our parents are not that well aware of environmental issues. We need to start conversations with our friends, with our peers, with our teachers. Whether it's not just specifically for our geography teachers or environmental management teachers, for all the teachers. Climate change is an issue that is very well connected with all the subjects of all the majors.
Yes.
We need to talk to someone. And we need to channel that energy, not just into being frustrated and not just being sitting around and doing nothing. We have to do it.
So,
And
Shamir, how can institutions help you? I understand this is what needs to be done, but what do you expect schools to do for you or your parents? हम क्या कर सकते हैं आपको support करने के लिए?
for supporting the students, I would say schools need to provide them with opportunities so they can put their energy into great use. For example, just recently WWF had an of a forestation drive with the school, and where the students were first reluctant to go there. And at the end, after they done that, they were like really happy that we have done something for the environment. People do not really acknowledge the fact that environment needs something and we need it urgent. But when the people do it, they see the change, they say that that's the thing we would have done. And secondly, for schools, I would say schools can provide students not just with the academics, not just with the best teachers, and always the best teachers are not, you could say, always.
The best teachers.
No, like I would say that the best teachers are not just the only thing that you need.
Yeah.
We also need something for practical, like for example, I would say that government has made registering NGOs a bit of troublesome for anyone. And for schools, schools can help up with that.
Okay.
For example, just recently we had Agro NDO registered. What Agro NDO is doing is that is working on from the school premises using the school resources, and it's outsourcing to all the farmers that
Very
are there, and it is providing a connection with the farmers with directly to the sellers or the buyers, cutting the middlemen. This way, farmers get more profit for what they have done, and they
That's
invest
amazing.
more. And
No,
this way,
that's amazing. Thank you so much. I think what I've understood from you is we can, schools can, and communities can support you with the legal side, with the administration of it, giving you opportunities, and giving you more than the classes. So that's a really good practical solution. Shazre is itching to say something.
I would just like to start off by saying asking your youth to be hopeful in a system that will never change is a bit futile. The most important thing you need is your government's policies to match the awareness you are raising. Because in schools, we're all taught the chapter of sustainability and climate change. Your kids make the glittery posters on styrofoam and cardboard and they bring it to school, and the very next day you've forgotten about it. We need actual policies. We need student initiatives to be supported. We need cleaner cars, better urban planning, cooler cities. We really don't need kids to sit in class and go, sustainability means leaving our future generations with something. We know what it means, but it appears the rest of the world doesn't want to let us contribute to what it means.
Thank you. So I think you are making a huge contribution already. You talked about policy and legislation, and here we have somebody who's actually contributed to drafting a legislation. So I think there's huge hope and potential here. G. Faris?
I wanted to say that, like, of course, I agree that legislation and everything is important. However, I do disagree with some points here because I do believe that ultimately the education and driving interest when it comes to climate change, it all starts from your school and it all starts at home as well. So I know that that a lot in a lot of schools, like we're all lucky enough to be taught about climate change and its effects, but there are a lot of places where they don't even know what it is as a concept. So I do think that instead of just having like empty projects in school and all of it, integrating climate change aspects into specific subjects and into parts of the curriculum would probably be the most effective way of not only educating people about climate change, but also like maybe inspiring or building some sort of baseline interest because we're associating it with maybe a subject they love doing. Like if we're talking about physics, we can talk about the science behind climate change and how it's affecting our world. So anyone who's interested in that would ultimately they'd develop an interest in the subject as well. So yeah, I do think that while legislation and projects and a place where you can talk about your issues is important, I also think that educating people about these issues is the main priority we should have here.
Thank you, Faris. That's a really practical suggestion. So I think schools are doing a lot and curriculums are being greened. For example, we were talking about fashion. So if you do fashion design and art and design in Cambridge, we will talk about sustainable fashion. And I know girls around here are not going to like this, but fashion is contributes more to carbon emissions than shipping and transportation combined. But how often do we think about it? So these things are all there. At least in Cambridge, we've tried to integrate, and I'm sure all the other curriculums and the government has a lot of curriculum around it. But absolutely. And so we were circling back to talking about how you guys feel, um, anxiety, some kind of small bits of very legitimate anger, people not realizing what the problems are. So, Shairat, do you have suggestions on what we can do to help you guys with those things, young people?
Okay, thank you so much for that question, ma'am. Okay, so first I would like to point out that there is a system of hierarchy. There is a pyramid, if you will. On the top, we have very powerful individuals. People like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and highly, powerful bureaucrats, and like the elite bureaucracy of the entire world, right? Then we have like people obviously below that, which makes legislations into the EU and all that. And then we have universities. So universities can make a huge, impact in colleges and in like research and development projects. So let me start by talking about Cambridge syllabus. So I have studied EM. EM, environmental management, is a very, very useful subject taught in IGCSE and GCSE. So I believe that Cambridge can also inculcate those concepts which are solely held into EM, into other subjects also. For example, there's the concept of catalytic converters being used in cars. There's a concept that nitrogen dioxide, when reacts with water, produces nitric acid. And there's the concept that when sulfur dioxide is produced by factories, it reacts with water and produces sulfuric acid. So these are all things which the students who don't take sciences have no idea when we are talking to them about this. So
Okay.
I believe that every human being, as a soul, as an individual, has the right to know about these things at a very personal level, right? So next, like we can run hands-on campaigns.
Sure.
We can run Q&A sessions with the students,
That's
and
right.
we can also build upon the fact that there are there is a silver lining on the dark cloud of climate change. So that is introducing students to the fact that our glaciers in Pakistan, are increasing by mass. Now, that might seem counterintuitive to you because global temperatures are rising by 2 or 3 degrees annually. So, how is it possible that glaciers in Pakistan are increasing by mass? It's due to a phenomenon called Karakoram anomaly. So, our glaciers have
We we have a really limited time now, beta. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your suggestions, and I think what I've picked up is spaces to talk, conversations like this, because this could go on. I thought 1 hour is going to be a long time, but looks like I'm behind schedule now because we haven't had any questions yet. And then my the one question I'm going to ask you, even if we run a little bit over, I'm going to ask you that. So is this our first question? Okay. So if schools redesign climate education, what practical and hands-on activities would you prefer as a student to be included in it instead of a purely theoretical one? So what practical stuff would you like included? Practical things, not theoretical content. Anybody?
Okay, thank you for the question, firstly. And I would like to, first of all, roll back to the fact that climate change is a part of our ethics rather than a choice that is presented by the academics itself. So I think there is a major disparity between the theoretical perspective and practical perspective of climate education in question, right? And I feel like the practical activities that need to be incorporated into our education are basically exposure to the technology that is being invented worldwide instead of like recognizing the issue, elaborating on it theoretically, and only informing the students about the consequences. We are supposed to understand the actual motive and idea behind the initiative as well that are being taken around the world. And I think climate education does not need to be limited to specialization, that if you only want to pursue environmental sciences in the future, then you are supposed to avail this information. Otherwise, you can just pass along, right? Okay? But I feel like it is part of your ethics, and as part of school which is responsible for my grooming and the way I deal with things, I feel like they need to expose us to many technologies like catalytic converters, the electrical vehicles that are being
Yeah, okay.
publicized in today's world, as well as the fact that sustainability, hydroelectric, solar, such technologies that are so widespread in today's use worldwide. But in Pakistan, the ratio is still very low. That clearly means that there is a lower percentage of people who are actually understanding the motive behind that technology. So I think there needs to be exposure to the academics, and there needs to be a compulsion that you're supposed to understand this information and implement in your daily life for your own good, rather than considering it as a generic theoretical choice.
Thank you. No, that's a really good practical solution.
Yeah.
What would you like to see happening, G. Shami?
For me, it would have to be that we introduce a year-long project for all classes.
Project.
uh, with this much, with a year to go to decide and all that things, students can really decide on new things, and they can really explore their options. Like for example, I would say we can decide on giving students something like they can go on, select a local issue and give their legislative solutions. That way, that legislative solutions could be sent to our parliament and all that, where they could put it into consideration for if are they good enough to be laws regarding that issue for
Right.
the locality, or should they need to be altered to be put in action.
Thank you. So we've got another interesting question, and uh, you can raise your hand, whoever wants to answer this. How can combining digital fluency with empathy prepare students to lead meaningful climate action in the 21st century? I don't know why we are asking you this question, but yes.
Just to clarify, by digital fluency, you do mean like the media we are um,
Chelsea,
consuming
can you
online.
speak to the mic? I can't.
Just to clarify, your definition of digital fluency is the media we're consuming
So
online.
who asked the
correct?
question? Can you ask that again? Can you raise your hand?
All right, I'm going to answer it with reference to the media we are consuming online. I'm going to be so honest, majority of the people I know who are now passionate for the environment, it started from one very simple thing, the Dr. Seuss Lorax movie. A movie about the climate made with empathy, made with purpose, because art imitates reality, art imitates your life, and it is also the thing that can move us most. Because as humans, we do things that we feel passionate about. We only do things if they self-serve us. We are self-serving people. We feel better about helping the environment, we'll help it more. Simple as that.
Yeah, thank you so much. There is another question, but I think the one I'm interested in, unless somebody really wanted to ask this, is one thing if each one of you could share that you've learned from each other or that inspired from another participant in this discussion. So one thing, one new thing that you learned from your peers today. Sure.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to mention the fact that they all are really qualified. I'm really inspired by the achievements they have made in their particular fields. And one specific thing that I would like to mention is that something that I value the most is diversity of perspectives. I think when we come down to solving an pressing issue, the most important principle is diversity of how people look into that issue, right? And when we have different perspectives to the same issue, we have a different amount of solutions to the same issue. We're able to pinpoint the main one, and we're able to obviously execute it to make sure that it gives us the best possible outcome. And one thing that I loved and learned as well, that there are a lot of initiatives around the world that we can take on individual basis as well. Because I think as a young person or as a student, I have waited many years for someone else to give me that platform to take the greater initiative, or for my school to give me the clear guideline on how to advent further into this topic. But I think what I've learned is that when you're able to utilize your resources, which most of us really have, social media, technology, internet, we are able to put that into implementation and take initiatives on our own and make sure that we are countering the loopholes that have taken place in the past,
Thank
so
you.
that we make sure that they do not happen in the future. So yeah.
Thank you. Ji Hassan, Shamir.
For me, it would have to be, what's your name? Shahryar's research. It was, I really was intrigued by how he presented it and how his ideas were unique. But I would say that since uh,
Hassan.
Hassan, yeah. So Hassan has also mentioned that different perspectives should be encouraged and they should be welcomed. So I would say that we have to look upon all of the other views as well. Like everyone is doing their work really greatly, but for me, the one thing that I would select is to learn would be about more about his research.
That's amazing. Ji Shastre.
One thing that I feel I can take away from this is that we, the future is not as hopeless as everyone makes it seem, because sitting here with me are four people, all of whom have amazing ideas on how to help climate change. Like, we have legislation, we have plastic uses. There's just so many different things that we can all come together to do as a community if allowed to. And it just, I hope it leaves everyone feeling as hopeful as I do about the future.
Thank you. Paris, आपने क्या सीखा आज? What was new?
If I'm being completely honest here, one of the new things I've learned and was inspired from was just the diversity of solutions which people are proposing to help like solve or like, help curb climate change, sort of. Like when it comes to Shayar's research, I was honestly fascinated because it's not often I see like people as young as us like talking about technical solutions or like actually go into deep research about this stuff. So I was honestly quite blown away here. Other than that, yeah, as they mentioned before, it's just the diversity of different perspectives here, which I was completely like amazed by, and I honestly enjoyed having such a discussion about this stuff.
Thank you. And we come to you. A lot of people are inspired by your research. So, what are you inspired by today?
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. So, firstly, I would like to thank my peers and my fellow panelists, all of them. They presented various beautiful point of views, I must say, and this was an outstanding session. If you include all of the point of views, so I'm inspired by what Shamir said. So, research paper that you published as a journalist, that's like going towards the literacy part, and not only the literacy part but also the law making and the policy part. That's very commendable right there. And then the work that the basically point that Shazray pointed out, it was about the history that we had with decades of like terrible urban planning in Pakistan that we had. And there is no doubt about that government should focus on infrastructure and maintaining infrastructure rather than expanding endlessly. They know how to expand, but to maintain infrastructure at a different level is entirely a different landscape, right? Then what Faris said was to aid displaced people. That's a really, really, a philanthropist point of view, I must say. And at the end, sorry, I forgot your name again. Hassan, yes. Hassan said that it was like the aspects and the unanimity of the whole panel that was, what curated it. So, like his point of views were also very well structured, and they inspired me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, I am hugely inspired and really optimistic about the future, because if you are the future, we have nothing to fear. And a huge round of applause for our wonderful, brilliant children.